Good afternoon. This is our public international law group presentation. Our group has been tasked to analyze a case study of territorial dispute between three states known as Tulu, Wani, and New York. Our analysis would rely heavily on the determination of territorial sovereignty of the said states under the principles of international law. I will first start by introducing our team members. Our team members consist of four individuals, which is myself, Jonathan, Ms. Ling Chen Wei, Ms. Zhou Lili, and Mr. Zhang Dengyu. Judge Huber, in the case of Island of Palmas, stated that sovereignty in relation to portion of the surface of the globe is the legal condition necessary for the inclusion of such portion in the territory of any particular state. So, the sovereignty of a state must have both internal and external factors, whereby the state needs to have a stable and functioning government over its territory, and the same is recognized by other external states. There are two methods in which a state may obtain such territorial sovereignty. The first is by constitutional means, and the second is by non-constitutional means. The first method usually involves some sort of agreement with the former ruler or administrator to relinquish their powers over the territory to the latter. The second method is more extreme use of force to obtain sovereignty, usually by war, or use of force which is against the will of the previous sovereign. Sometimes the combination of both methods is used, whereby a new state may gain its independence by first use of force and subsequent agreement with the disposed sovereign to form a new state.
Hello, my name is Ling Chen Wei, and I'm delighted to have the opportunity to discuss the fascinating topic of territorial disputes. I would like to focus in particular on Tulu's claim to sovereignty over the island of New Tulu and its in relationship to the principles of international law, according to established principles of international law. Territory can be acquired through one of five main methods: occupation, control, cession, annexation, or conquest on occupied land. First, let's consider whether the island was genuinely uninhabited. Well, we will delve into the fact that the island was originally discovered by Wani explorers in 1798. It is important to acknowledge that they neither established a credible occupation nor made a clear claim to it. In fact, they considered the island insignificant and uninhabitable. It is crucial to note that before the 18th century, the principle of find and process was paramount. However, with the development of international law and the growing opposition to colonialism and imperialism, this principle has come under increasing scrutiny. The mere concept of discovering and occupying territory is no longer considered sovereignty. Therefore, the island should have been considered colonialist before 1800. After this, Tulu cleared New Tulu as the territory of Tulu at an Independence Day ceremony. The declaration of sovereignty, as in the Slipperton Island arbitration case, may be regarded as sufficient to create a valid title. Moreover, it is worth emphasizing that Wani took control of the island by force in 1872, and Tulu subsequently regained the island by similar means in 1875, while contemporary international law and the international community strongly propose recognizing territorial changes acquired through war. It is important to recognize that this prohibition was formalized only after the 1928 ILO Broad Pact and the United Nations Charter outlawed the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity or political independence of any states. The conflicts of 1872 and 1875 occurred at a time when these prohibitions were not firmly in place. Furthermore, throughout history, there have been examples of territorial change through warfare, such as the conquest of the Roman Empire or territorial expansion of the Spanish Empire through conquest and exploration. Thus, the conquest of Wani and Tulu can be considered legitimate. Remarkably, Tulu eventually emerged victorious and retained control of the island. Taking all aspects into account and carefully weighing the pros and cons, I have come to the conclusion that I support the legitimate ownership of this island by Tulu. I sincerely thank you for your attention.
First, let us recall the basic principle of international law. In the international law, there are two constituent elements to be met for implementation. First, the expression of states' intention to take process of the territory. Second, active occupation. In 1798, the Wani explorers went to the island and survived the whole island, but they considered it to be an insignificant island with no inhabitant. As George Herbert authoritatively explained it in the Island of Panama's case, effective occupation with the connection of effective control means that the discovery of a piece of land does not necessarily give rise to survivorage. The discovery of a piece of land does not necessarily give rise to sovereignty rights, but only to intellectual title, which must be followed by the exercise of the state's right of continuing the peaceful statehood over the territory over the considerable period of time before it can be involved in the national sovereignty. This must be followed by the exercise by the states of continuous national rights of peace over the territory for the considerable period of time before it can be evolved into national sovereignty. Although one did not have effective control over the island in 1798, he discovered of the island first gave rise original right, which would evolve into national sovereignty through the exercise of a continuing peaceful nation right over the island over a period of time. In 19, Tulu also discovered the island and he created the Tulu territory, but Tulu never actually operated it effectively, and one is still retained the unfulfilled rights to the island. as evident by the discovery and the destruction of the Tulu and visited by Wani explorers in 19. The discovery and the destruction of the Tulu traced by Wani explorers in 1945 that Wani did not relinquish its sovereignty over the island. At present, in the Paramas Island case, the fact that the Netherlands had relatively little state action on the island did not affect its continuity, and the normal exercise of state power could not be claimed over a small, remote, and inhabited island. Wani then continued and peaceful exercise of state power over the island. From 1798 to 1815, Wani's original rights should have developed in state sovereignty. According to the United Nations Commission on the Law of the Sea, 3 by Economic Zone, Article 15.5, the island is 16 kilometers from the Wani coastline. It is an exclusive economic zone belong to Wani, which have sovereign right and other judgments over the island national resource. In 1972, Wani acquired the island through war and declared it its own territory, renaming it New Wani, an actual basis on a fundamental principle of international law, the right of conquest. The only factual requirement for the establishment of the right of conquest is that the territory must actually be in the process of the conquest. It is clear that Wani have actually taken process of the territory by the conquest, although conquest was based on the aim of restoring his own territory, and he therefore effectively acquired the territory rights to the island.
Hello everyone, today my opinion is that the ultimate territorial sovereignty belongs to New York. My analysis of the above country verses is as follows. The occupation of uninhabited island is based on the following principles. 1. Effective control. 2. Public declaration. 3. Principle of non-resistance. And 4. Violation of international law. I believe that the initial sovereignty over the uninhabited island belongs to Tulu, because Tulu was the first country to publicly declare its claim of sovereignty over the uninhabited island. A public declaration is a statement of formal application to other countries and the international community indicating the right of sovereignty over the island. In international law, sovereignty over uninhabited island is usually based on certain legal procedures and effective control by the state. The state can demonstrate its claim to sovereignty over uninhabited islands through public declarations, the establishment of permanent facilities, the provision of basic service, the enforcement of laws, and the the maintenance of law and order. This requires the state to make a clear declaration of its sovereignty over the island within the international community and not solely on the basis of the exploration actions of individuals or groups. Thus, the explorers from the valley, while exploring the uninhabited island, did not acquire sovereignty over it, while Tulu's declaration of sovereignty without actual occupation and effective control of the uninhabited island might have been disputed. Though other states had at the time claimed sovereignty to the country, and the subsequent destruction of the insignia by the explorers from the valley on their visit to the island was an individual's act and an invalid one, insufficient to contradict Tulu's public declaration. Treaties of territorial cession are concluded on the basis of a number of principles and provisions of international law, including, for example, the principle of sovereignty equality, the principle of self-determination, the principle of contract law, the principle of good faith performance of international treaties, the principles of international arbitration and settlement of disputes, etc. The two states, Tulu and New York, are great parties to the contract and have reached an agreement between themselves on the basis of equality and mutual respect. And the state and the people have the right to decide for themselves on his territorial belonging. After New York had acquired territorial sovereignty over the island by treaty, a series of acts such as the exploration, resettlement of citizens, and the renaming of the island had demonstrated that the state were in fact occupation of the territory in international law. Sovereignty over an uninhabited island usually requires more than a mere declaration of sovereignty. It also entails actual occupation and effective control with the state, leading to have a continuous and physical presence on the island to administer its affairs and to maintain effective jurisdiction. Accordingly, I found that sovereignty over the island remains with New York. Firstly, the occupation of the island by Wani through its conquest by war should be regarded as an illegal occupation, and the international community as not normally recognizes the occupying powers effective sovereignty over the territory in international law. Secondly, Tulu's occupation of the territory through war is still an unlawful conquest of territory by force, which is regarded by the international community as illegitimate act, and literally does not automatically entitle occupying citizens to valid sovereignty rights in international law. International community prefers peaceful means of settling disputes in order to avoid conflict and uphold international law. Finally, in public international law, territorial disputes are a long-standing issue that cannot be ignored, and we should think of joint solutions to territorial disputes through dialogue, respect, and mutual trust, as well as contributing to global peace and stability by following international law and advocating peaceful ways of settling disputes. The will not only help to maintain international peace, but also to create a more just and stable world.
To conclude, for the arbitrator to decide which state would have the most legitimate claim, there are two factors that must be shown. The first, as Judge Huber mentioned in the Island of Palmer case, which is title to territory could not be established by a once and for all display of sovereignty. It had to be continuous. The display of sovereignty must be ongoing, and it would rarely consist of a single act. The second factor that is display of sovereignty must be up to the critical date. The critical date here would mean the date at which the question of sovereignty is to be assessed, and the time for such assessment stops running at that date. The critical date would vary for each case depending on the facts. For example, in the Taba area boundary arbitration, the critical date was determined to be on the date of entry into force of the British mandate over Palestine rather than the date of the Israel-Egypt peace treaty. And in the Minquers and Arcos case, the critical date was held to be the date at which the dispute was submitted to court. Once the date has been determined, then the doctrine of intertemporal law would be applied. Intertemporal law means the law to apply to a given dispute is the law in existence at the time of the critical date. Hence, current law would not apply, and the court or arbitrator would need to apply the laws which were relevant during the critical date. However, Judge Huber has a separate view on the above, whereby he said that a distinction must be drawn between the creation of a right and the maintenance of a right. As such, title to territory may be validly created under the rules of international law existing at the critical date. But whether that title can be maintained has to be assessed according to the rules of international law that exist currently. By using the same analogy, although the critical date would have been on an event that occurred from the period of 1798 to 1875, the arbitrator would still assess the matter using the rules of international law that exist today. Since Tulu had displayed effective occupation up to this day for more than a century after their conquest in 1875, they might have the most legitimate claim over sovereignty of the island and any natural resources that comes with it. That in itself concludes our analysis of the case for today. Thank you.